Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. Napoli's title challenge took a hit and we're only in September at the hands of who? Sampdoria. Where did Napoli go wrong? How did Sampdoria frustrate Carlo Ancelotti's men? Don't worry, here at the interviews, we've got you covered. So on this edition of the interviews, we're going to break down how Sampdoria beat Napoli. So Sampdoria provided the first shock of Serie A this season. In today's video, we're going to break down how Sampdoria pressed along with their goals, how Napoli tried to combat them and press from the front as well. And then we're going to go into the second half to break down what changes Carlo Ancelotti made and how Napoli grew back into the game. But first, when we do break things down, we have Napoli in a 4-3-3. A few changes made it in their lineup. Up front, Milic, Insigne on the left, but on the right, Verdi instead of Callejon. In midfield, Diawara plays instead of Hamšík. You have Alan and Zielinski in midfield, and the back line didn't change. Koulibaly, Raul Albiol out on the left and the right, Hisai and Mario Rui. Then, when we look at it, how are they trying to line up? We expect Callejon to obviously break him behind, but they don't have that. Verdi dropped off a bit deeper. With Hamšík not there, you have Diawara. It looked like he wanted more of a physical, combative midfield, so that's why he was in there. And you can argue that he's probably the better choice in that holding role. He plays reliable passes. He has the ability to cover ground, so he slotted in there. And when you look at Napoli, they want their center backs to push forward. They want them to dictate play from deeper. They want the fullbacks higher to help out with the wide players. They want Insigne cutting in and picking up the ball in this channel in the half space right there. And then with Milic, they want that all-round center forward play. Ability to poach goals in the box, ability to play with his back to goal. And that's where Napoli went with this game against Sampdoria, but they didn't know what they were going to come up against, because when we get to Sampdoria, they do play in more of a 4-3-1-2, or you could say it's more of a 4-4-2 diamond. Up front, they went with Tyrrell and Quagliarella just ahead of Saponara. In midfield, Ekdal holding just in front of the back four. You look out in the wider areas, Linetti and Barreto charged for being the shuttlers, looking to cover space in those wider areas in midfield. And when we get to the back four, Tonelli and Anderson at center back. And then we look at the full backs, it's Muru and it's Bereszynski looking to get forward as well. When you think about the 4-4-2 diamond, obviously you're trying to keep space in midfield. You're trying to compact it. You're trying to dominate the center of the pitch with ball players. You're trying to get the ball into Saponara so he could get in Tyrrell and Quagliarella into goal-scoring opportunities. But could they do that against this Napoli side that once upon a time used to press well, that wants to contend for the Serie A Scudetto? Well, when we look at it and we do break it down, it is going to be tough, but we have to start with what Sampdoria did right in the first half. So let's start off with Sampdoria and what they did do right. It was the way that they pressed that really stopped Napoli from getting into this game and really dictating the tempo. How did they do that? Well, they pressed from the front. They had the strikers pushing out to the center backs, and this was a constant theme throughout the first half. Stepping into the center backs, ensuring that Koulibaly and Albiol couldn't push forward. Diawara tried to drop off, and Saponara stayed right with him, ensuring that those three couldn't play out of the back. If they want to push it out wide, what would happen is that Barreto would push over to Mario Rui, and then you still have two numbers right there with Ekdal coming over to cover that space. If the ball was shifted over to the other side, to Hisai and Linetti had to push over again, covering the space. They had to play long balls over the top. They never really got settled into the game. And what happened with Sampdoria is they kept pressing and they ensured that Napoli couldn't build from the back. If there was the odd occasion where they did lob it over and they were able to retain possession, how would they combat with that? What we often saw here is that they would drop into a narrow, extremely narrow 4-3-1-2, and they'd have Saponara kind of dropping off as well. And what would happen there is that now, if they're so narrow, obviously there's spaces in wider areas for Napoli to push forward, for the fullbacks to push forward. That again, the same thing applies, covering the spaces, the shuttlers pushing out to the left as well. So there wasn't an issue there. They did have a few issues with Verdi kind of dropping off a bit, picking up the ball and trying to deliver crosses into the box. But when they did get get freed into that space. It just never really worked out. There was one opportunity where Koulibaly kind of clipped it into that space for his side to push forward, and Sampdoria was caught out narrow, but in that occasion, again, cross played right into the keeper. It just wasn't good enough from Napoli. They struggled in that sense, and that was how Sampdoria really contained their attacking threat in the first half. And then we look to the goals and how they scored them, both somewhat similar in terms that they came from more so not set pieces, but in transition, or just more of a defensive mistakes from Napoli. You look at the first goal, it's a corner kick, and it's cleared out to Tyrrell. What happens here is that you have Zielinski and his side pushing forward to him, and then what he's able to do is he's able to link play with Linetti, and then you have Saponara charging into that space because now his side is pulled out of position. He drops off into that space, he gets onto the ball. What happens now is that he's able to pull the ball back for Tyrrell, who is pushing forward it towards the box. The cross comes back to him. He's able to fire a super effort past Ospina. We think about other opportunities that they were able to create from open play. And again, you have to look at Napoli in a nutshell, and what happens here is that Ekdal finally finds space to get the ball, and he plays it into Saponara, who again just is able to find that space to the right of Diawara. It wasn't the first time that he was able to find that space. What happens here is that he's ended up being tracked by Alan and Zielinski. He's able to push them both off. Moru ends up charging forward down that left-hand side. He slides the ball to him. Moru sees Quagliarella making the run towards the edge of the box. He connects with him, but Quagliarella is able to fire the shot over the net. We look to the second goal, it's just more bad defending from Napoli. You could say it's a bit unfortunate, but again, someone needs to be able to mark out these plays. Again, it's Ekdal, and what happens here is he shifts the ball wide, and who does he shift it wide to? It's Berezinski this time down the right, and what happens is that Napoli's already caught in their narrow back four. Rui ends up pushing out, but what happens here is you still have the three defenders that are able to deal with the two forwards in the box. What happens is that they all drop together, and the cross is played just in behind them. It falls to Quagliarella. He's able to instantly play to Tyrrell, who does fire it off the defender, but it beats Ospina, and Sampdoria up to nothing. Again, high pressing from the front, containing them. Narrow, compact, organized when they're deeper, taking and executing their opportunities in transition and in wide areas when Napoli were too slow to come out. And that was how Sampdoria had a great first half and were up 2-0. So then we get into Napoli, didn't have the best first half, struggled to create any goal-scoring opportunities. Yes, Ancelotti's selection can be blamed, but they weren't that very good individually or as a unit. When we do look at it, obviously we know that they're being pressed out of the game, and that is one big issue for them. But the individual players up front didn't perform. Milic with his back to goal wasn't that good. Loose passes, sloppy touches, it wasn't good enough from him. When he was placed in chances to score goals, he wasn't getting shots off. Crosses in from Mario Rui, firing a shot at the keeper. Insigne cutting in, playing it into him. He can't get the shot off. We know what Verdi was about, dropping off a bit deeper, playing in crosses for Zielinski. He fired his shot and it was blocked. Playing in Insigne, driving into that space, but it was cut off and he was offside. Then we look to Insigne, not that very good, not influential in the first half. His best chance coming from when Koulibaly could play passes from the back. Found Alan in an acre of space at the start, ends up sliding in Insigne behind the defense. He chips the keeper, but it wasn't good enough and was cleared off the line. But when we look at Napoli as a whole, we think that Sampdoria is pressing them very well. So how would Napoli press? And that was the most interesting thing about Napoli in the first half, because when you think about the 4-5-1 when they do press, it's not that complex. You look at it, you can let the center backs go. And if you let the center backs go and you let them have the ball, it's not that difficult, because then you have Milik sitting on Ekdal, you have the shuttlers pushing out to Linetti and Barreto, and then you have Diawara focusing on Saponara. Obviously, then you have the wider players pushing out to the fullbacks, and you don't really have anything left for the fullbacks to really get onto, because even if you don't do that and you let them tuck in and you want to press a bit higher and you have the fullbacks push forward, they still have ample space in midfield because numbers are covered in those central zones. If we look at it and they don't do that, and you have, let's say, Milik push from the front and then you still sit off, what could happen there is that you push perhaps one of the players to sit on Ekdal, or you ensure that he covers off that space, maybe have a fullback push out. Like I said, the first option is obviously the simplistic one. That was one way they could go about it, but they didn't do that, and that is what was really off, because of how they did press Milik up front, let's say, and he pushes to Anderson, then you'd have Zielinski push out to Tonelli, and you'd have Alan cover the Ekdal. What happens here now is that you have a shuttler push off, and then you have the wider players push off onto the shuttlers. And what would happen is that the ball is pushed out wide to the fullbacks, you'd have Insigne push out, and then Zielinski come back to cover. And that was very odd from Napoli. The same thing happened on the other side, and it was a big issue that they had because it led to goal scoring opportunities because Sampdoria was able to bypass their pressing. We look at two opportunities that really sprung to mind. Ball played in, obviously Milik presses Milik steps forward and he presses Anderson, so that leaves Zielinski to press Tonelli. Before that can even happen, again, you don't have players understanding their roles, and what happens here is that Insigne's out wide. The ball is able to be played into Barreto. Barreto gets the ball. Insigne's not even close to him yet. He passes it to Ekdal. And once Insigne gets there and Alan is trying to come across, because once Zielinski presses, Alan is marked with doing the job of pressing the deepest lying midfielder. Once Alan gets there and Insigne gets there, the pass is already played in behind to Barreto. That forces Diawara to then shift over, and when he does shift over Diawara, there leaves space for Sampdoria to break forward. He's able to charge forward. His shot is blocked by Koulibaly, but that was one effort. It's a sad shame for Sampdoria that Sampdoria had to come off for Gaston Ramirez due to injury, because Gaston didn't offer the threat or the spatial intelligence that Sampdoria did to get on the ball and expose Diawara's positioning due to Napoli's press. We look at another opportunity that does arise, and how does this go about? Well, basically here's that they're trying to play out of the back. And like I said, you have Napoli in their 4-3-3. And what happens here is that Milik presses Tonelli. You have Alan, who is now tasked with stepping to his marker in Anderson. And what happens, the ball is played out wide to Muru. Verdi now, who was dropping off to Linetti, has to push over. Now that gives Linetti space to push into that channel. Diawara steps. What happens, there's Tyrrell now pushes into that space to check into the ball. Hisai tries to get it before him. Tyrrell pushes off. And once Tyrrell drags him out of position, what happens here is that Gaston is able to get onto the ball. And when Gaston gets onto the ball, Linetti still continues his run, even though Diawara did try to close him down. He continues his run. The ball is shifted out wide, and then you have, again, Tyrrell trying to push into that space. So Tyrrell tries to push into that space. Koulibaly cuts it off. Quagliarella was breaking to the box, but Mario Rui was ahead of him. But like I said, two opportunities where they do press, and they are exposed by the ability of Sampdoria to just play quick passes, bypass it, because they were slow to getting to their marker. They were pulling into positions that they didn't have to, and Sampdoria easily bypassed them with quick passing and intelligent movement. And Napoli had a lot of issues. Their attacking players weren't getting it done. Barring Alan, who was able to carry the ball forward and evade challenges, Napoli struggled, and Ancelotti was forced to make changes in the second half. So Ancelotti was forced to make changes at the start of the second half. He brought on Unas. He ended up bringing on Mertens. That means Callejon and Hamsik didn't enter the game. They moved to more of a 4-2-3-1. Mertens playing off Milic. Unas from the right. Then you had Diawara and Alan sitting a bit deeper. Again, like I said, the big change in the second half was Napoli were more direct. It stemmed from Unas, and Sampdoria dropped off a bit deeper. They were pegged back now. And what happened is a lot of the cover came from the wider positions. And what happened there was that it was Linetti pushing over to try and help out Muru, and then you had Barreto shifting over, trying to help out Berezinski. But when you think about it, Unas was the key man. Diawara was able to get on the ball because Gaston wasn't getting closer to him. And what happened here was that he just kept driving at goal. First time he gets on, runs at Muru, cuts outside, forces the keeper, dangerous cross, to push it away for a corner. You think about a time when, even with Linetti pressing him, he's able to turn him with ease, play the ball into the channel for Milik. Milik's able to cut in, but has a shot blocked, and then it falls to Alan, who has a pile driver blocked as well. Lots of opportunities down that side, more chances for Unas, playing in Milik into the half space, and then Milik plays across through the box for Zielinski, but he's unable to get his shot on goal. Like I said, a lot of it stemmed from just Unas dropping a bit deeper and running at Muru. It ended up leading to Salah coming on at left back and Linetti permanently staying in that zone to ensure that he couldn't really get forward. But that is where Napoli was finding their joy. Like I said, Diawara was often a threat, more time to play the ball, more time to get forward. There was one time where he actually ended up dispossessing Gaston near the edge of the box and then poking in the ball into Mertens, but Mertens fired a tame effort at goal. Napoli just had more men forward, but again, just not enough from Milik, nothing really going through him. You had Mertens popping up into spaces, that obviously helped as well, but it just wasn't good enough for them, and they were unable to really create chances if it wasn't from Unas driving down the right-hand side. He did it on several occasions. He was their key man in the second half, and what did it take for Sampdoria to kill off the game? It was a counterattack, arguably their first one in that second half. It led to a free kick that eventually saw Quagliarella score arguably the goal of the season. And yes, we're only in September, but the second half, when we break this all down, let alone just the second half, we break this all down, we look at Sampdoria, they pressed well, stopped Napoli from playing out of the back, they dropped deeper, very organized, they were able to bypass Napoli's disjointed pressing, they were able to push forward and execute. Saponara was finding space in behind Diawara. The forwards were efficient in the box. And then in the second half, they were able to drop a bit deeper. They did struggle against the threat of Unas once Ancelotti changed the system to a 4-2-3-1. But Quagliarella's goal was the icing on the cake. And they are fully deserving of the 3 points. Whereas Napoli, and maybe September, but already taking a step behind Juve in the race for the Scudetto. But let me know what you guys think. Can Napoli contend under Ancelotti? Do you think there's an issue with some of the players in the dressing room as to why they didn't start? And what about Sampdoria? Was this a one-off, or can they finish in the top half of Serie A this season? Meet me in the comments below. Don't forget I upload videos every day, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And that was your daily dose of the interviews.